This week on Brian Ross Investigates.
What's going on? How come you're crying?
I'm sorry, we've just been fighting this morning.
The chilling police body cam videos of Gabby Petito.
And I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean.
Allegations of domestic abuse, but her boyfriend was not arrested. What should officers have done? What do officers do in other jurisdictions? Two top domestic abuse experts take us through the case. Plus, parents' anguish. Their college student daughter Samantha got in the car she thought was her Uber ride home. It was not.
Drives off, and that's the last time that, we could see her on any kind of video.
Now, Marcy and Seymour Josephson are making it their mission to prevent what happened to their daughter from ever happening again.
If she said to the driver, what's my name, and he couldn't respond to it correctly, then she wouldn't get in the car.
The A is for ask. Ask what's my name.
And this week's winners and losers in the media. See if you agree with the choices made by the editors of Mediaite.
I need the two of you to step off for a second.
Okay. Anna and
we're going to bring
Sunny
you back later.
have to leave. Yeah.
Yes.
From the Law&Crime Trial Network, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our friends on Facebook Live. I'm Brian Ross, joined as always by my colleague here at Law&Crime, Rhonda Schwartz. And Rhonda, we begin with what appears to be another sad story of domestic abuse that led to death, and what questions about whether the police could have done more to prevent it. And of course, we're talking about the case of Gabby Petito and her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. Rhonda?
That's right, Brian. And these police body cam videos from Moab, Utah, show the chilling moments when officers arrive to investigate, but then leave without making an arrest. It was the last time Gabby Petito was seen alive.
You want to tell me what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, some days I have really bad OCD, and
Okay.
I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated, not like mean towards him.
And to get a better understanding of what's happened here, we're joined by Kenneth Nunn, Associate Director of the Center for Children and Families at the University of Florida and a law professor there, and Ann Brebner, a trial lawyer in Seattle and former prosecutor there. And before we get to you, let me show you one more clip where the police say they're not going to make an arrest.
I've decided I am not going to cite you for domestic violence battery, okay? It was only going to be a Class B misdemeanor. However, the domestic violence portion of it enhances it. Makes life a major pain in the butt, especially you're 22, right? So I'm choosing not to cite you today. So you are not going to be charged with anything. All right? But this is what I do have to do. I am separating the two of you tonight.
And Ann Brebner, let me start with you. What should police have done in this case, do you think?
Well, I think they should have at least cited him, or it didn't get to a mandatory arrest in terms of actually taking him into custody. But under Utah law, they had a citizen reporting that he had struck her. And so basically they should have separated them to where they could get a better story from her about what really happened. But under Utah law, the use of the word shall in the statute says, if there's probable cause to believe there's domestic violence, there shall be a citation or some type of arrest. You get to true mandatory arrest where there's an injury, a weapon, or continuing abuse. Probable cause to say there's continuing abuse. So this is a very difficult case. Would there be discipline against the officers? There could be. Could there be liability? Maybe.
And Professor Ken Nunn, let me ask you, and let's show you this other clip where police actually have a complication because her boyfriend says he was the one who was attacked. Look at this.
You want to tell me about those scratches on your face?
She had his cell phone in her hand. That's why I was pushing her away, because she wanted me. I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not, go anywhere. Let's just calm down for a minute. She was getting really worked up, and then she had her phone and was trying to get the keys from me. So that way, I was just trying to. I know I shouldn't push, but I was just trying to push her away to go. Let's just take a minute, step back, and breathe. And She got me with her phone.
So, Professor Nunn, let me ask you this: looking at all this, how do you think police should have sorted this out?
Well, I think that that officer is probably second guessing himself right now. Feels really bad that he made the decision not to make an arrest at the time that he was present. But I think it's very difficult to see that there's probable cause for an arrest of Brian at this point in time. As the clip indicates, Brian is the one who had injury, and he had a rational and reasonable explanation for why they were fighting and why he was, that in fact he was defending himself. And it's kind of hard for the officers to be able to sort that through at the moment. You've got one person who seems to be calm and collected, does not seem to be angry. The other person who seems, as has been reported, has a mental health issue going on more so than being angry or upset. I think it's difficult to do that. I think separating them for that night was the right call. It's hard to know that now, knowing what we know, but it looks like that at the time that was probably the right call to make.
And Ann Brebner, a question for you from Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
So, in a situation like this, if you have the complainant, the female victim says, "Please don't arrest my boyfriend or my spouse," what should the police do?
Well, that can happen a lot of times in domestic violence cases. We know that, especially when he's in close proximity during the course of the questioning of both of the parties. I find it interesting that the park ranger who's been interviewed, who was there, the female park ranger, warned Gabby that she was in a toxic relationship. I mean, she must have seen something there that would indicate that there was victimization. But I go back to the caller, the initial 911 caller, who said that he had slapped her, he had struck her. And that's what they were responding to, and they had a duty to investigate. I think further, should there have been a mandatory arrest? That's a different question. These are very difficult calls, but you have to be awfully careful because domestic violence, as we know, can escalate into serious injury and or death.
And Professor Nunn, as you know, these calls, domestic abuse calls, are some of the most dangerous calls for officers. What are the policies in major and progressive police departments in cases like this?
Well, let me just agree with Ann's statement that the officer should have separated both parties and got independent stories about what was going on. The problem with talking to both of them together is that if one is intimidating the other, then you're not going to get the full truth. So I think that's correct. That should have been done, and that was an error. And in a lot of these departments, what happens is you have a mandatory arrest provision where if there is an allegation of domestic violence and the police come and find that allegation be credible, then they're required to make an arrest on the scene. Other departments, as is the case here in Florida, have a preferred arrest provision where they don't it's not mandatory. And I think what Ann was explaining in Utah, it's mandatory if there's some violence used, which was the case in this incident. But it is preferred under other circumstances without the violence. There's a preference for arrest or citation. But those rules were put into place because historically what would happen is the police would show up, they would dismiss these domestic violence situations. They treated them as if, well, that's what, either married couples or people who are involved in a relationship do. And it was considered normal. So they didn't really take any action. And these new innovations in the law started coming around in the 70s and the 80s to correct that.
And Brebner, we have 30 seconds or so, but these are tough calls for police. Are they
Okay.
trained enough to deal with this kind of situation?
I don't know if they can ever be trained enough. They're so difficult and they're such tough calls to make, but we have to be vigilant about these kinds of cases. I think mandatory arrests are important in terms of state laws. We have that in Washington. They have that in Utah. In this case, taking him into custody on a mandatory arrest probably would not have been warranted, but there could have been something done that might have mitigated what happened in this case or even prevented it.
All right. Ann Brebner and Professor Kenneth Nunn, thank you very much both for being here tonight. Well, coming up next, parents' anguish. Their college student daughter was murdered after being kidnapped, thinking she was getting an Uber ride home. Now their mission to prevent it from ever happening to anyone else again. You're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law and Crime Trial Network.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTube TV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTube TV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTube TV. We put you in the jury box.
And welcome back. We turn now to the tragic story of Samantha Josephson, who died as a student at the University of South Carolina. And now her parents have turned their grief and anguish into a campaign to make it safer for anyone who calls an Uber or a Lyft to get a ride home. College senior Samantha Josephson thought she was getting into the Uber ride she ordered after some late-night drinks with friends at the University of South Carolina in Columbia. It wasn't an Uber.
He spent a lot of time in search of a victim, and he found somebody that, was vulnerable and obviously confused on, what car was her Uber ride, and took advantage of that.
Drives off, and that's the last time that, we could see her on any kind of video.
The 20-year-old co-ed was found dead the next day, badly beaten. The driver of that car, Nathaniel Rowland, charged with first-degree murder.
He is pure evil. I pray that he feels Samantha's pain.
Do I tell you that I've contemplated suicide? Several times over the past 28 months.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
Rowland was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But since then, Marcy and Seymour Josephson have launched a campaign so that what happened to their daughter that night does not happen to anyone else.
If she said to the driver, what's my name, and he couldn't respond to it correctly, then she wouldn't get in the car.
Because with Samantha, she got into the car and the back safety locks were engaged. Once you're in the car, it's too late. So immediately we started the What's My Name Foundation.
There have been a series of television public service announcements.
Samantha was abducted and attacked and violently killed that evening.
The importance of sharing your location to friends and family to protect yourself is so important in this day and age.
Help us prevent another unimaginable tragedy.
What happened to Sammy should never happen again.
And at the graduation ceremony, where Samantha received her degree posthumously, the university president made the point.
Class of 2019, on the count of three, would you join me in repeating, what's my name? My name is Samantha Josephson, all together. 1, 2, 3. What's my name? My name is Samantha Josephson. Thank you, everybody.
But the Josephsons' campaign ran into politics when they took it to Washington, trying to get a law requiring electronic confirmation codes. The Josephsons say they found that Uber was working against it.
That is 100% true. They said yes, now they say no.
Their home district congressman, Republican Chris Smith of New Jersey, continues to push the bill.
Well, we got it passed in the House. We almost got it passed in the Senate, but we added it to a must-pass bill. And at the very end of the session, somebody at DOT, we're not exactly sure who, were able to put the kibosh on it, which was, I think, awful. It means that we do not have the protections in place right now. But we're not going to quit. We're right back trying to get this life-saving piece of legislation over the goal line.
And is Uber on board now?
Well, it's hard to say. After it passed the House, they changed the goalposts and tried to lobby for additional things. One of those revolves around the opt-in, opt-out provision. We say you're automatically part of this digital handshake, if you will, so that you know that this is your ride and the driver knows that this is my passenger. It also creates a permanent record. And then all of a sudden they said, well, we want it so that you have to opt in. So the individual users would be opting in. No, it's almost like seatbelts. You want it to be as automatic as possible, unless you take the time to say, I want nothing to do with that. And why would anybody do that? This is ensuring a safer ride for everyone.
So bottom line, you are optimistic this bill can finally pass?
Oh, yes, I'm very optimistic. I read a lot of laws, particularly as it relates to human rights. They often take longer than a year or two. This should have taken, a month or two. But we do have buy-in from both the speaker, the majority leader. It is bipartisan, and the same thing goes over on the Senate side, where the top 4 people that run the U.S. House of Representatives are all supportive. The Josephsons have really changed the culture, which is making a difference. More people are aware of the risks associated, and after their loss, they are just the most heroic people, the most compassionate people I have ever met.
For now, Samantha's parents are pushing cities and towns, especially college towns, to put up the Sammy signs the foundation has created.
We called her Sammy. She always went by Sammy. So the stop, review all safety features. And then the A is for ask what's my name.
The signs are up now in the area of Columbia, South Carolina, where Samantha disappeared.
In a statement to Brian Ross Investigates, Uber told us that we believe technology can make travel safer. We look forward to working with legislators and stakeholders on solutions that promote continued innovation on safety. But the company did not say whether it supports the bill being pushed by the Josephsons and Congressman Smith that would require the 4-digit electronic code match to be mandatory, not voluntary. Coming up next, this week's winners and losers in the media. See if you agree with the choices made by the editors of Mediaite about the departing Saturday Night Live cast member, Beck Bennett. You're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law&Crime Trial Network. Time now for this week's winners and losers in the media, as chosen by the editors of Mediaite. And we're joined by Aidan McLaughlin, who's the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, which, like the Law&Crime Trial Network, is part of the Dan Abrams media empire. And Aidan, you chose as your winner this week Saturday Night Live cast member Beck Bennett.
Eight seconds flat.
Even better than last week.
Wow. I didn't think I could get any faster.
And Aidan, why is he this week's winner? He's leaving the cast.
He is. Now, we decided to make him winner because this marks the end of a long and hilarious run for Beck Bennett. He was one of the most prominent fixtures on Saturday Night Live. He was there for 8 years after joining the show in 2013. And when NBC announced the cast for its new season on Monday, Bennett, who memorably played Mike Pence, Chris Wallace, Vladimir Putin, was not a member of it. He is the only real, prominent regular SNL cast member who is leaving. And but he was 8 years at the show. He delivered some of the most memorable performances there, and he'll surely go on to do more exciting things now that he is off the show. Which the new season, I should say, premieres this Saturday. Owen Wilson will be hosting for the first time, and Casey Musgraves is performing as the musical guest.
And what's the backstory and your hunch on why he's leaving?
I think for a while, the reason why people would leave SNL is that they wanted to pursue other projects. It's a fairly demanding show. You have to, every week be in the writer's room working on it. The reports say that Lorne Michaels, the executive producer of SNL, has given the cast a little bit more leeway with pursuing outside projects while Saturday Night Live is running. So I think that retains a lot of the talent that they have. But for someone like Beck Bennett, who's been there for 8 years, I can imagine he wants to go on to act in other TV shows, movies, feature projects. I think working 8 years on a show, any show, is a long time to be doing it. So I don't think there's any reason other than him wanting to move on that he probably left.
As so many other great comedians have. And for the loser this week, you chose the ABC News program The View, which had a complete on-air meltdown with two of the hosts apparently testing positive for COVID-19 just before the Vice President of the United States was about to arrive in the studio.
There seems to be something happening here that I'm not 100% aware of. Can someone please apprise me of the situation?
I need the two of you to step off for a second.
Okay. Anna and
we're going to bring
Sonny
you back later.
have to leave.
Yeah. Yes.
And we'll tell you why.
More information later. It's a tease.
We'll tell you why in a couple of minutes.
Well, Aiden, nothing like live TV.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, it was really a remarkable moment, though not one that I think The View really wanted. They had planned to do an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris on Friday, but that got derailed by that pretty extraordinary moment you saw there in which two hosts of The View, Anna Navarro and Sunny Hostin, were pulled off the set in the middle of a segment because they had just tested positive for COVID-19. It was pretty wild and meant that the two other hosts that you saw there had to awkwardly kill time while producers figured out a way to get the vice president set up for a remote interview. So it was a total fiasco. And then we found out on Monday that the tests were most likely false positives and that the two hosts, Anna Navarro and Sunny Hostin, had repeatedly tested negative and they were back on the set on Monday. It was a pretty entirely preventable crisis. That's why we made them loser of the week, because they could have gotten the COVID tests done well before they went on air. And so it was a crisis that the EP of the show, Brian Teta, actually apologized for on air on Monday.
So, but quite a, it's like watching NASCAR. You watch it for the crashes, I guess, huh?
That's the thing, at the end of the day, it is incredibly entertaining. Though I think just the fact that it came right before an interview with the vice president, it's not like they were trying to fill time with some drama before a serious interview with a newsmaking figure. So, it's not an ideal thing to happen right before that sort of interview.
All right. Well, Aidan McLaughlin, thank you very much for your choice this week. We'll see you again next week. And thanks to all of you for joining us here tonight. And thanks to our great staff here at Law&Crime for getting us on the air and off the air without a hitch.